This is the story about the Asthall bells, recently rehung in the church of St Nicholas. The ancient and tranquil village of Asthall, with its 25 houses, church built in the 1100s and the Maytime pub, has changed little since the first bells were hung in the 15th century, in the then newly built tower on earlier foundations, in the Roman settlement which grew up where Aikman Street forded the River Windrush to join the Roman fortress towns of Cirencester and Bicester. The original ring of 3 medieval bells has been hanging in the tower for some 600 years, but sadly the old oak frame started to deteriorate some 50 years ago and was beginning to affect the structural integrity of the tower itself, so the full circle ringing of the bells had to be abandoned, and gradually the equipment fell into a bad state of repair. The Parochial Church Council decided it was time to restore the bells and commenced the huge task of raising the £65,000 required, drawing up the necessary plans, obtaining the faculty permissions from the Diocese, commissioning the architect, bell hanger, builder and foundry to produce an augmented ring of 6 bells and replace the old wooden frame with a steel one.
Handmade.
Masonic sort of...
No, they're just calipers for measuring off the drawings. Because the drawings wouldn't have any measurements on them.
No, right.
You just basically take the drawing would be to scale.
I've got my glasses.
Yes, I think they've been here, because they were behind those edge beams, I reckon they've been up here for 500, 600 years.
This is the relatively easy stage. Just bring them back out through the church entrance. We put boards all the way down the pass, run down the pass, and then we make a ramp to get them from the step into the back of the van. Well, we're taking out the 3 existing bells, and they're going to be taken away and loaded up in a van and then retuned, and 3 more new ones will be added to them, and then there'll be a nice ring of 6 bells by Christmas time.
In order to save over £4,000 in labour costs, the work called upon volunteer labour under the foremanship of Nicholson Engineering of Bridport, the bell hanger. In August, the heavy work began, assisted by the Burford Bell Captain Nigel Harrison, Churchwarden and Project Director Jeremy Holand, and Robin Meach, a busy marine consultant. We then set about lowering the bells one by one, and the heavy oak timbers of the old bell frame piece by piece, a hot and dirty job, requiring heavy lifting equipment, chain blocks, tackles, much pulling and cursing. It was also rumoured that some 600 years' worth of bird droppings had to be removed in the process.
The most difficult part of will probably be yet to come, trying to get the new frame, the new steel frame going to be put in. Actually fitting the frame in the tower, because however carefully you measure it all, the walls are never straight, and there are odd bits and pieces which will get in the way, no doubt, of the new frame. It's done quite well actually, but it's actually come to pieces a lot quicker and easier than I thought for.
Guano, is it guano?
Guano.
Guano, yeah.
Guano, yeah, guano. Very fine.
Fine. It's a guano bit.
I told him about whether the bell frame itself was listed. And he said it couldn't be because that's definitely Victorian.
Yeah.
But it doesn't explain how medieval bells are hung on a Victorian frame unless something happened to the frame.
Yeah, but then usually every 100 years, 120 years, the bell frames are wore out anyway.
So they go through what we're doing, but go back with wood instead of steel.
Because in another 100 years' time, someone's going to look at it and think, well, how did they get 14th century bells in a 2000 frame?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just
with difficulty, I would suggest.
Yeah, I'm sure, and it's going to be.
There are 3 people on board, and that's me, him and...
We have secret weapons. We have the water bombs, and we have the water pistols, and we have the smoker bombs, which may or may not be us sinking today. But and apart from that, we have the bread.
Various local fundraising projects added to the fun and to the £20,000 raised by local parishioners. Most notably the raft race from the Swan Inn at Swinbrook down the Windrush to Asthall.
Ladies.
This was in commemoration of the Battle of Trafalgar.
Number one, away!
Even the French contingent was not forgotten.
No! Let her, darling. That's it, another one fine. It's the Johnny Onion Man. I am an illegal. Yes, I have no papers. He's crossing the border. I have no... I claim asylum.
The Honourable Rosie Taylor, present owner of Asthall Manor, was kind enough to offer her water meadow for the finish, and the following fete, tug-of-war, sack races and other traditional English pursuits, and was persuaded to present the prizes to Lord Nelson, of course.
Old Asthall bells have been delivered into the foundry by the bell hanger.
Nicholson's, right.
He's already cut the cannon loops off the top of the smallest of the three bells, which is the youngest bell.
That's the Loughborough bell.
And drilled a centre hole to clear out any cast-in iron staple that was in the bell. The two very old bells have been left with their cannons on. These loops on the top, we call them cannon loops. We think probably because bell foundries used to make bells, and in times of war they made cannon. And cannon in ships have got loops on so that the rope tackles can be used to take the recoil and to move them about. So I think that's why these get called cannon loops.
And you reckon they're about early 15th century?
That's
Something
what
like
they
that?
say.
Yes, yes.
The problem is once you get to very early bells, the inscription doesn't have a date in it.
No.
So you have to start working from the shape of the bell, the style of the lettering, the style of the cannons, and come to an idea about how old the bell might be.
Those two bells are actually listed.
The larger of the two bells is going to be tuned, but the smaller of the two bells is not going to be tuned. So we're retaining as much history as we can while making the peal sound correct. It's called loam moulding because we use a material called loam, which is a traditional material for foundry work. Ready for this afternoon's cast.
At the Whitechapel Foundry, the foundrymen have the molten bell metal, a bronze made of copper and tin, ready for pouring into the moulds lined with a special loam made from clay, sand, goat's hair and horse manure. Both bell metal and bell mould compositions have been in use since the Middle Ages, and in spite of all the advances in modern metallurgic technology, have not been able to be improved. Once the bells were cast, they were tuned upside down by slicing small slivers from the inside with a vertical bell lathe to achieve the desired note to fit the required chromatic scale.
The next thing for them anyway is to pour the surplus metal into ingot trays when they're finished throwing sand about.
I'm Andrew Nicholson, Managing Director of Nicholson Engineering Limited, and this is our works in Bridport in Dorset. And this behind me is the completed ring of 6 bells for Asthall in Oxfordshire. Originally 3 bells, of which 2 were medieval bells cast at Wokingham in about 1450, we think, and that's these 2 bells which are closest to me here.
So this is the tenor.
Yep, yes it is, yeah, this is the tenor bell.
And that's about 600 weight?
Yes, it's just a shade over 600 weight as it now is, having been tuned.
Right, and we then move on to the...
That's the 5th.
Number 2?
No, that's the number 5.
Number 5. Uh-huh.
That's number 5. Same bell founder, still a medieval bell. This one's about 500 weight in weight, just slightly under in fact. And of course all the fittings that we see, all the framework is all brand new. It's only the bells themselves. There's 3 largest bells which are your original components, if you like.
The original headstocks were wood. That was...
Yeah, they were elm.
Elm.
Yes.
Elm. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas these are all fabricated steel now.
Steel, yes. Yeah. With presumably modern bearings.
Oh yes, yes.
All bearings.
All sealed bearings. They'll need maintaining about every 25 years.
Right. Lost us out.
We hope. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we wander around this way, then we can have a look at the other ones.
This is the smallest of your original 3 bells. Of the ringing bells.
Taylor bell.
That's right. That's the Taylor bell.
How does it sound? Can we have a...
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's tuned really very well indeed. And we've been very pleased with that bell.
Sounds great. Now we come up to the first of the new bells, which are cast in Whitechapel.
That's right. Now this is the bell that was given by the Duchess of Devonshire, and so this is the Mitford bell, if you like.
Indeed, yes.
And weighs just about 400 weight. These 2 bells are about the same size, in fact. And so this bell is a modern harmonically tuned bell, but the tonal quality is really indistinguishable from the tuned originally.
Bell,
yeah. So we're really very pleased with the match. It's worked out extremely well.
And it's the same mixture of metals.
Oh yeah, yes.
About the same proportion.
It hasn't really changed. I mean, the 2 medieval bells are 500 years old or so,
yes.
and if you were to analyse the metal from them, it wouldn't have changed. It's 77% copper, 23% tin.
23% tin and 70% copper.
Yeah, 73. Yeah. So.
And it's the same proportion. If it's more than that, then you get a different tonality,
yes.
Or it gets too brittle.
More tin makes it brittle.
Right.
And produces a more harsher sound.
Right. So the moulds that are the casting was made round.
Yeah.
That's another primitive mix, isn't it? That's
It's a very primitive mix. Yes, it's a mixture in Whitechapel's case of London clay, sand, goat hair, and horse dung.
Horse dung, is it? Oh, it was cow manure.
No, it's horse dung. The goat hair acts as a binding in the mixture, really holds it all together. The horse dung actually makes the mould gas permeable, believe it or not.
So it stops the casting cracking.
I think that's basically
metal
it. Yeah.
Cracking. Yes, it was explained to us at Whitechapel, but it's a bit difficult to comprehend.
It is a primitive mixture, though.
2005 that we need.
Yeah.
Goat's hair and horse dung.
Yeah, yes. There we are. And that would have applied equally to the old 3 bells.
To the old 3 bells, and they still haven't changed the casting mix or the moulding mix since 1570 or something, wasn't it? They started making
Whitechapel,
bells at Whitechapel. Yes.
Yes, quite remarkable.
And of course the medieval ones from Wokingham a lot earlier.
Much earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another 200 years earlier.
Yeah. So if we move on round, we've got another 2 bells round here. This is the bell given by the Powells. This is the 2nd of the ring.
Right, this is in the Leonard Dark.
Indeed.
Perhaps you can let us know a little bit about Mr. Dark.
Yes, Leonard Dark was my stepfather, who died in 2004, and when the appeal for the bells came round, we all wanted to do something in his memory, and he discovered the Windrush Valley in the 1960s and visited it for some 40 years and loved coming to Asthall Lee, and he loved the churches and he loved music, and so we thought a church bell would be a perfect way to commemorate him.
The third bell, the lightest bell,
the smallest bell, yeah,
smallest one, is inscribed with Psalm 95, verse 1. "O come, let us sing unto the Lord, let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation."
Indeed.
Let's hope they're joyful noises that we will be making.
Yeah, well, I think they're going to be a fairly joyful peal. They're going to be a very musical little ring of six, these.
That sounds wonderful.
We're really pleased with them.
Yeah, great.
And we've got a very good splice between the new and the old, and that's the key to it, really.
We were invited to Chatsworth House in Derbyshire to speak to Deborah, the Duchess of Devonshire, now the Dowager Duchess, in her sitting room. Deborah was fondly appreciated in Asthall and Swinbrook and donated one of the bells in memory of her 5 sisters and brother Tom. She's the last surviving member of her famous and talented family, the Mitfords. We thought we might learn more about her connections to Asthall, her famous sisters, the 1920s, and her twin passions for Elvis Presley and horse racing.
I'd just like to thank you, Your Grace, very much for inviting us to Chatsworth. It's a wonderful experience for us to be up here and to see what you've done over the last 40-something years, and to thank you for donating the bell, the famous bell which is inscribed by yourself with all the names of your brother and 5 sisters, wasn't it? Which is going to be hung in Asthall next month.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be able to do that, because it's a kind of a link, in a way, between my family and Asthall, which is lovely for me.
What do you remember about that period, the 1919 to 26 period, when you were living in Asthall?
Well, no, I wasn't quite born in 1919.
No, of course you weren't.
But I was born in the next year, so I was only 6 when we left.
Right. Yeah.
And I have a lot of memories of it, probably some through my sisters, that when you hear a lot about a place, you begin to think that is actually, that you remember it. But anyway, they were very happy there. I think my parents were very happy there. And as far as I remember, I certainly was.
Yes, when you moved to Swinbrook, and Nancy and Decker started writing their books, they were referring presumably to Asthall, of the famous cupboard upstairs, which you used as an HQ for Ons and Rebels.
The Ons cupboard, yes.
Yes, the Ons cupboard.
Wherever we were, we used to use the linen cupboard, because it was the only warm place in the house, according to my sisters.
Right.
But just to go back to Asthall for a moment, why my elder sisters and my brother loved it so much is that building at the end of Asthall Manor, which was called the barn then.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose it was a barn, no doubt, and my father made it into a room with some bedrooms above, but that was theirs, and they were completely separate.
Was that where the ballroom is now?
Yes. It's now called the ballroom, but it was the barn in my day.
Okay. And that's where the piano was?
Yes, and that's where they were able to lead their separate lives. Nobody heard, nobody bothered. They really were able to do what they wanted, and they never had that at Swinbrook.
Yes, quite.
Also, they had my grandfather's library there, and that is where I'm sure that my elder sisters really became so interested in literature and all the things that they were interested in.
Yes, because that's the fascinating thing about your whole family, is how all of them became so literary and so famous.
Well, being famous, that was very odd. Becoming famous always amazes me. But the fact that they were literary, I don't think is really surprising, because both my grandfathers were writers. My father certainly was not, but it was in the blood, as it were.
Yes, right. Because when you go through that book by Mary Lovell, do you approve of that one?
Yes, I believe it's very good. I must tell you that I haven't really read it from cover to cover because I felt I knew the story.
Yes, I bet you knew the story.
But I love Mary Lovell, and I think she did a fantastic job.
Yes, I thought it was most amazing book. And what other family of that era could possibly have produced so much talent? Was it anything to do with education, do you think? Or lack of it?
I think lack of it.
Lack of it. Because
excepting I must also tell you that people younger than myself don't realise that it wasn't a bit unusual not to go to school then.
It was not unusual.
It was not unusual.
Right.
A lot of families had a governess at home. Or the boys used to go to school, certainly, and my brother did. He followed the usual route, but
yes.
My sister's not. And my father was very much against girls
educating girls.
Well, girls going to school. He just thought it was a waste of time. I think he had a point.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't turn out so bad, did they?
Because they all had this wonderful independence of mind, all your sisters. They seemed to somehow, I mean, one became a communist, another one became a fascist, and they wrote about it and achieved such amazing notoriety, fame, whatever. It's
yes,
for one
I
family.
Yes, they were very varied. The only one who wasn't in well, there were two not interested in politics, myself and my sister Pam.
Yes.
She wasn't a bit interested.
Don't hear much about her, Pam.
She was wonderful.
Yes.
She was unique. She was a marvellous cook, marvellous gardener, all those things.
All those home things.
But she was not interested in politics or London life of any sort.
When you opened the Swinbrook Cricket Club, which was most appreciated, that's the reason when I first saw you down there.
Great fun that day.
That wasn't it? The pavilion. You mentioned that that the bedroom you occupied in the cottage at Swinbrook would probably not even be given planning permission to be used as a bedroom nowadays.
It wouldn't fill the building regulations, not at all. It was tiny.
And then the contrast from moving from there to here after you got married must have been quite extraordinary.
Well, yes, I didn't move here for a long time, but nevertheless, I suppose it was. But you never forget where you were a child, and it's in a funny way, it's still home to me.
As you know, we're putting these 6 bells into the tower at Asthall, where there were 3 before.
I know.
And the 3 were quite close to the Elizabethan manor that you were living in at Asthall. Did the bells affect you much in those days?
Well, I can't remember. You know how when you're a very little child, those things just are part of life and you don't particularly notice them.
But
we certainly noticed the churchyard because we were always fascinated by the funerals, you can imagine. And we weren't supposed to look.
Right.
But of course we did, because it was so close. We were nearly in the churchyard.
Yes, of course, it absolutely overlooks it. Have you met Rosie Taylor, who now owns the art? Right.
Wonderful. She's a great asset, isn't she?
She's certainly spent a lot of time and trouble on the gardens and so on.
She's done. My family were very, very happy at Asthall.
Yes.
For all the reasons we've said. First of all, the beauty of the place and the niceness of all the people round about, and then the luck of the older ones having the barn to do what they wanted in, which they never had again at Swinbrook, and they were always, I suppose, really looking for a room of their own, which they never had.
Right. Yes, because the impression I get from Mary Lovell's book is that that all the rest of the family, when they moved to Swinbrook, hated it, but you loved it.
I loved it.
Yes.
Because I loved the ponies and I adored hunting and I loved the woods. I loved every inch of it round there.
Yes.
And but I was still a child, you see, a young child, and they were all getting grown up. And they wanted a different sort of life, and they wanted to go to London and do different amusements.
So you were more or less abandoned at Swinbrook House?
Well, me and my next sister up, Jessica, who was 2 years older, we were there for... Till it was sold when I was 16. It nearly broke my heart when it was sold. I adored it.
So did you had to sell the house for financial reasons then, or was it let?
Yes, my father was always selling houses for financial reasons.
He quite a gambler. He must have been quite a character.
No, he wasn't a gambler, but he wasn't very lucky with his things that he did, and we used to my mother used to let the houses.
Yes.
You know, obviously, if we couldn't afford to live there, we let them. And we went to a cottage either at Swimbrook or another one we had at High Wycombe.
And then you also used to rent houses in London for the season and things like that.
Yes,
Was that something that was normally done in those days?
Very normally, yeah. It wasn't odd a bit.
Right.
Everything was geared to May, June and July in London. It was all to do with the Houses of Parliament.
I see.
Sitting, because they often didn't sit in the autumn. So anyone who was to do with politics in any way had to be in London in the summer months, and that's what started what's called the season. That was the reason.
Right.
Yeah. I always thought in such a way to sweat away all the winter making a nice garden, and then the really beautiful months you go and live in London.
Go and live in London.
The life was so different then. The Parliament was not an everyday job like it is now.
What other contacts do you still have in
Swimbrook and Asthall? Well, I have cousins living down there,
really?
Which is always a pleasure to go and see, and friends round about as well. But it's the actual place, it's the country and the woods and that valley. It's just
Windrush
magic.
Valley is magic, isn't it? Yes.
I think so.
Once we hang the bells in the church tower, the normal process, I gather, is that we have a dedication ceremony.
Yes.
And the bishop dedicates the bells, and they're rung ceremoniously, and anybody that has donated towards the bells, like yourself, would then be invited to the service. Would you like to come down for that?
Well, I'd be very grateful if I were invited. I'd love to come if I can.
That would be sort of February, March. Would that be convenient?
I hope so. It just depends on dates and things, I'm sure. But that's
because we only have two dedicated bells. One from yourself and another from a couple who live in Asthall.
Oh yes.
The Powells, Nick and Cecilia Powell.
Oh yes.
Who've donated a bell in memory of her stepfather.
Oh.
So obviously we must try and get the two of you together.
Well, that would be
particularly on the dedication ceremony.
I just hope that'll come off. That'll be grand.
Well, thank you, Your Grace, for inviting us up here to Chatsworth. It's been a wonderful experience to see how you live up here and what you've done over the last 50 years to make this probably one of the most famous stately homes in the country.
Well, thank you for coming. It's a pleasure. Anything to do with Asthall or Swimbrook is always a great interest.